The 4 definitions of slope we've talked about so far in this class. The first one we talked about, I'll give you the first one, I'll call on some people from the last 3. Constant rate of change was the very first thing we said, that the constant rate of change is the same thing as the slope. We had 3 more. Think about what you just did. Whenever you did a table, what do we say for a table? Raise your hand. What do we say for a table? We need some help today. Change in y over change in x. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about, the fractions, right? So now think about a graph. Can someone raise your hand and tell me what do we have for a graph? What are our fractions? Luke?
Oh, crap, never mind.
Wait. What do you got, Caden?
Rise over run.
Rise over run. Mm-hmm. And then there's another way to say that.
No, y over x.
We already have that.
Crap.
What is, so think about how the other way I talked about, rise over run. You could also say, raise your hand. What is it, Lily? Vertical over horizontal? What are you pointing to? Oh, you're talking about the formula? That's the same thing as change in y over change in x. I'm looking at the poster where it says graph, vertical over horizontal. Vertical change over horizontal change. Remember, if you see me put those little triangles, it means change. All right. Let's review what slope-intercept form is. It's in the form y equals mx plus b. Leave yourself some room because we're not just going to write this in the box. We're going to write some other stuff. What does m stand for, guys?
Slope.
We also know that as the rate of change. Same thing. And what does b stand for?
Y-axis.
Y-intercept, which we also know as where it starts, or we call the starting point. It's actually a point on the graph. It's where it crosses the y-axis. So 2 different names for the same thing. Slope and rate of change, interchangeable. Y-intercept and starting point, interchangeable. So let us move on. Here's what we're going to do pretty much. There's 2 examples, so I will do one with you, and then you'll do the second one with your partner / alone. Yep. Okay, write an equation of each line with the given slope and y-intercept. So I know that the slope goes in front of the x because it happens over and over and over, right? We're adding or subtracting the same amount. So that would be y equals -3, goes right next to x. And then the y-intercept goes alone because it's where you start. Don't assume just because it's a fraction that it's the slope. Could you please do the second one? So write your equation. The slope is 0. The y-intercept is -2. Lauren, what do you have for the equation?
Y equals -2.
And how come, so if you wanted to put the 0 in the equation, what would it be?
Y equals 0, x minus 2.
And so you went ahead and simplified it to just y equals 2, -2, right?
Yeah.
And you're allowed to do that because this is a horizontal line with a slope of 0. This is 0 fun. And so you could just get rid of that 0x. Either one of these is a perfectly acceptable answer. If you put either one of those on a test, you get 100%. I will take either. So how do you write an equation if you're given a slope and a y-intercept? You can put this in your own words. If you want to use what I write, that's great. But again, these are your notes, so if it makes sense to you a different way, then don't write down what I'm writing down. Answer it your own way. I'm going to say the slope goes with x. The y-intercept goes alone. If you have a different way to think about it and you don't like my explanation, then don't write it down. Put your own explanation. You will not hurt my feelings. In fact, I will be impressed with you because you're making your notes personalized to you.
Because I'm Russian.
Gentlemen.
Dude, I would have so much respect.
Okay, let's move on. Example 2. So now we're going to do graphs. Again, we need to find the slope and the y-intercept. So we'll do the first one together. You'll do the second one alone. So you need 2 points to hit the corner of a square to get the slope. And then you make a right triangle. We count the squares, but be careful. Check and make sure it's going by ones. Is it going by ones?
It is not. Yeah.
Because it's labeled every 2 squares as 2.
Oh.
So yes, it does go by ones. So 4 and 4. So the slope is rise over run, 4 over 4.
Can be simplified to 2 over 2.
Or just 1.
Okay, guys, be quiet.
So what we could say, and then let's go ahead and get the y-intercept. Remember, the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So that'll be right here at -2. So again, look where it crosses the y-axis. That's your y-intercept. So my y-intercept is -2. Put that together in an equation. Y equals 1x minus 2, which you could also write as just x minus 2. Either of those is perfectly acceptable answer. I will take either one.
Why are we putting this on?
Could you please? So find the slope. Make sure you check if it's puff, puff, positive or nice, negative. The last one we just did was positive. Okay, let's do this one together. Our slope should be -1/3 because it goes down 1 right 3. But if you look at that, it's a nice negative line, so that's your cue. 1 over 3, but make it a nice negative. The y-intercept is at -1. So Tressa, what's my equation going to be? Yeah. Wonderful. So at the bottom of the page, could you please explain how do you write an equation if you are given the graph of a line? You can put it in your own words. I'll write some stuff on the board, but it's your work. And whatever makes sense to you should be what you write. So I'm going to say that the m is equal to slope, which is rise over run. I'll say that the b is equal to the y-intercept, which would be where the line crosses the y-axis. Okay, we're going to do the first one together. Make sure you're ready. Determine the slope and the y-intercept for each table, then write the equation of the line that represents the data in the table. So let's figure out the slope. Doesn't matter where you choose to look. I'm going to go in the middle. Say from here to here, from 6 to 9 is +3. From -1 to 0 is +1. And so my slope would be 3 over 1, change in y over change in x, which would simplify to 3. And then the y-intercept is where x is equal to 0 because it crosses the y-axis and x is 0 at the y-axis. So my y-intercept is 9. Look for x equals 0, not y equals 0. So the equation should be 3x plus 9. Could you please try the second one. Well, actually, we're going to do that one together because it's a little weird. I remember that. Gentlemen. Okay, slope for this one goes -5 and then +1. So that would be -5 over 1, which is just -5. And then the y-intercept, again, is where x equals 0. Here's a problem. Do you see an x equals 0?
We do not.
No. So we need to add a 0 into the table. So we have to extend the table, keep it going, and figure out the pattern to figure out what would the 0 be. So we could put a 1 right here, and then a 0, right? Because then it would fit in the table. So think about where it would make sense for 0 to be, and then put it there. And now think about your pattern from right to left. It goes 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and then it'll be to 35, and then 40. So your 0 would be 40. We can fill in both. So that one is 35. That one is 40. This is your y-intercept, 0, 40, where x is equal to 0, so it's on the y-axis. Write it as an equation. -5x plus 40. So how do you write an equation if you're given a table? We know that the slope would be change in y over change in x. We know that the y-intercept would be where x equals 0. If you don't see a 0, then you have to add it in. Last little section. We've already done word problems like this before, so we're just going to get better and better at them. Again, the slope is what happens over and over because it's a constant rate of change, so it's either adding or subtracting the same amount over and over. The y-intercept is where you start, or what happens once. So we've talked about this before. The thing that happens over and over goes by a variable. The thing that happens once does not. So Mrs. Brandt starts the day with 100 Sour Patch Kids and eats 5 Sour Patch Kids every class period. I wish. You guys haven't brought me any. I'll take some for Christmas if you want. Oh my gosh. No. But I'll take some Sour Patch Kids if you want to bring some. Halloween, Christmas, my birthday is May 1st. You have lots of options. Yeah. Okay.
May 7th.
So we got to figure out what happens over and over? Which number? Which number happens over and over and over? 5. So this happens over and over. So that would be your slope. And are we gaining 5 Sour Patch Kids or losing them? So -5 would be your slope. -5. And then 100 is where you start. So that would be your y-intercept. Just like you start at the y-intercept on the graph, that's where you're going to start in this problem, is at 100. So for my equation, I would probably put 100 minus 5 every class period. It does not matter which order you put. You could put the x first or the x second, like the -5x first or second. It just makes more sense to me like this. You start at 100 and then go down at 5 every class. And the last one's Kim Kardashian. This is actually true. I looked this up. Makes $500,000 each episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashian. Each episode.
Wait, let's do the math here. So there's 17 seasons.
$500,000 happens over and over for Kim Kardashian. Don't you wish that was you?
That's more than only one. No, it's not.
And then hypothetically, before the season starts, how much has she made from episodes? None, 0.
If my theory was right.
From this season, current season, she's made 0. So let's go ahead and put it in an equation. 500,000 goes next to a variable. Since the y-intercept is 0, you don't have to write plus 0. You can just leave it as 500,000 times x times every episode. Could you please summarize your notes? The essential questions on the top left of the board. How do I write equations in slope-intercept form? The questions on the front are wrong.